Hello everybody and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. I did a video recently on the Beatles and their cars until they broke up. So I decided to do another video about the cars of the Beatles after they left the band. We'll start with John Lennon. And when John moved to New York City, he decided to purchase a green Chrysler Town and Country station wagon so he could get around without being noticed. It was a 1972 model. After John Lennon died, Yoko used the car to get around the streets of Manhattan, and she kept the car until 1996. Then she sold it to a collector. According to AutoEvolution.com, this was John's favorite automobile because of its practicality and modesty, and it allowed him to travel virtually unrecognized. It was used primarily for city travel and rides between their Manhattan apartment and Long Island estate, and it was also used for one particular cross-country journey. Next, John Lennon and Yoko got a 1979 Mercedes 300 TD Estate. Their assistant, Fred Seaman, had complained about the Chrysler's bad brakes and the worn-out tires, so Yoko instructed Fred to ask the business manager to write out a check for the Mercedes, and this was the last car that John Lennon purchased. John used this car to carry around his recording equipment, and it also carried the master tapes of his final album, Double Fantasy. It is interesting that John decided to go low profile after his move to New York, and he got cars that most people would consider family cars. I bet John did love that he could ride around in these cars without people noticing him. Next up, we have Paul's cars. Paul in 1973 purchased a Rolls-Royce Corniche. It was a car that, according to GQ magazine UK, that rock stars and royalty loved. It had higher cruising speeds and covered more space with less tiredness for the driver and his companions. McCartney's two-door cabriolet featured coachwork by Molyneux Park Ward and a 6.75-liter V8 engine. Paul had a Lamborghini. It was a Lamborghini S2 Espada in 1972, and he bought it secondhand in 1975. It was a right-hand drive model, and the Espada came with a 350 bhp 3.9-liter V12. Wow. So Paul was going to sell it a few years later after purchasing it, but he told the person that was going to buy it that he liked him and he couldn't sell it to him because the car ended up in a pond when Linda forgot to apply the handbrake. So, whoops. Next up is the Ford Bronco 1989. Paul got this car when he decided to take a trip with his girlfriend and later wife, Nancy. They decided to take a cross-country trip to get to know each other better. He got the car in 2008, and it's understated, but a classic SUV. It was a fourth generation 4x4. I guess it was a good trip because they married in 2011, and they're still married to this day. Next, he ended up getting the Chevrolet C5 Corvette 2003. GQ UK stated that Paul probably got this car since he had an American wife and they lived in Beverly Hills. It's a perfect car on a sunny day. Next up, Paul got a Lexus LS 600H in 2008. Paul received this car as a birthday gift from Lexus, and that must be nice. It was for his 65th birthday. The car was shipped all the way from Japan. And when Paul McCartney married Nancy in 2011, the bride arrived on time at Westminster Registry Office in the hybrid Lexus. George Harrison in the late 1970s loved Porsches, and he bought two 911 Turbos and a 924 Carrera GT. In 1980, he bought a black 928S Coupe before selling it 3 years later. Next up is a Mercedes. According to GQUK.com, in 1970, George bought two Mercedes, a red 250 CE pillarless coupe, and a white 6.3-liter 300 SEL. And he was driving that second Mercedes in February 1972 on his way to a party being given by Ricky Nelson, and he crashed into a lamppost. He escaped with a few scratches, but his first wife, Patty, suffered a concussion and broken ribs and was hospitalized for 2 weeks. It sounds like she really got hurt in that accident. Next, he had the Mercedes 600 Pullman limousine. Well, this car belonged to John Lennon first, but John decided to sell it to George when he went to New York in 1971. Later, the car was bought by Mary Wilson from the Supremes in 1976, and she later used the car for the Supreme's U.S. tour in 1979. So that was an interesting note. Everybody seemed to love this car. Next up, he had a Mercedes 500 SEL AMG. George bought this in 1984 and probably spent a whopping 85,000 pounds customizing it, including lowering the suspension and upgrading the body kit. He must have liked the results because he hung on to the car for 15 years. And next up, in the last car on the list, is the McLaren F1. And this is the most expensive car he purchased, and there were only 106 built, and they were custom made for the customer. The designer of the car, Gordon Murray, stated that George Harrison was excited to get the car, so he kept calling to jokingly pester the makers on the progress of the car. The end product was a dark purple pearl exterior and black satin wheels, and it's still owned by Harrison Estate, in spite of Eric Clapton's repeated attempts to buy it. Next up, we have Ringo Starr. And for some reason, I had trouble locating Ringo's cars, and the following cars are the only ones I could find. It's a 280 SE 3.5 coupe. And early on May 19, 1980, Starr lost control of this car on the Robin Hood roundabout in Kingston. It clipped a curb, somersaulted, and landed on its back. He and passenger Barbara Bach, the former Bond girl and the future Mrs. Starr, escaped with minor cuts and bruises. They later had the car crushed to a cube and installed in their home. Like I said before, I don't think I would want this a reminder of the accident I had in my living room. Next, he had a 1967 Mini Cooper, Radford DeVille, bought via the Beatles manager Brian Epstein. The luxury Mini was modified with a hatchback so it could accommodate Ringo's drums. So that was thoughtful of Brian to do that for Ringo. And then next is the Mercedes-Benz 190 SL. Ringo Starr bought this Mercedes in 1984, and the car was a production version of the 2-liter engine. And Starr had it converted into a 190E 2.3 AMG in England. His baby Benz got a spoiler, a sports steering wheel, and a sports exhaust, colored aluminum wheels, and a more powerful 2.3-liter engine. The Beatles' latter cars are just as interesting as the ones they purchased earlier in their careers. They seem to want to be less conspicuous in the years after the breakup, and they wanted to blend in most cases, though sometimes, as you can see, they chose cars that were more conspicuous. They do show that they have good taste in cars, and they still enjoy purchasing them and enjoying them. And I hope that you enjoy the video. And below the video, I've added a few Amazon items that may be of interest to you. It has a link to Amazon, but you won't be charged anything to click on the link. I just may get a small commission if you happen to purchase any item that you see that you might like. But I hope everyone's been having a good day. And if you like the video, if you could click on the like. And if you haven't subscribed, if you could do that, it would be great. And I hope you'll tune in again soon for the next video on the Beatles Forever. Thank you. Bye.